The photos hit my kitchen table like a bomb going off in slow motion. Jenny's face, flushed and laughing, pressed against some muscle-bound jackass in a cheap motel parking lot. Her wedding ring catching the neon light as she ran her fingers through his hair. I'd been married to Jennifer Walsh for 8 years. 8 years of her climbing the corporate ladder while I fixed cars in my garage. 8 years of her girls' weekends that always seemed to involve mysterious new lingerie purchases. 8 years of feeling like I was married to a stranger who happened to share my last name. "Well, Mac," I said to the grizzled private investigator sitting across from me, "I guess my gut was right after all." Mac Donnelly had been following cheating spouses for 23 years. His weathered face had seen it all, but even he looked uncomfortable as he spread out more photos. "Your wife's been seeing this Rick Castellano for about 4 months now. Every Friday, same motel off Route 9. Sometimes they grab dinner first at that Italian place on Elm Street." I picked up another photo. Rick looked like every middle-aged guy trying to recapture his college glory days. Perfectly styled hair, expensive watch, gym membership he actually used. The kind of guy who called everyone buddy and drove a leased BMW. "He works with her at Morrison and Associates, right?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jenny had mentioned Rick plenty of times, always in that slightly breathless way that should have been my first clue. "Yeah, he's in marketing. Divorced last year, pays hefty alimony to his ex-wife, lives in one of those new condos downtown, the ones with the fancy gym and rooftop pool." Max slid an invoice across the table. "That's everything you asked for. Photos, timeline, locations." "I'm sorry, Dave." "David Walsh. That's me. 34 years old, owner of Walsh Auto Repair. The kind of guy who still believed in fixing things instead of throwing them away. Apparently that philosophy didn't extend to marriages." I paid Mac in cash and walked him to the door of our little colonial house on Maple Street. The same house Jenny had called charming when we bought it, before she started dropping hints about upgrading to something more professional in the suburbs. The rain was coming down hard, turning the October leaves into a soggy mess on our front lawn. I stood in the doorway watching Mac's taillights disappear into the gloom, then went back inside to study the photos some more. Jenny wouldn't be home for another 2 hours. She was supposedly at her book club, which I now realized was probably code for screwing Rick in his fancy condo. The thought made my stomach clench, but underneath the hurt was something else. A cold, calculating anger that surprised me. I'd always been the nice guy, the one who fixed everyone's problems, who kept his mouth shut when Jenny made little digs about my blue-collar job or my limited ambitions. But looking at these photos, I felt something shift inside me. The nice guy was taking a permanent vacation. I gathered up the photos and locked them in my toolbox out in the garage. Then I cracked open a beer and settled in to wait. Jenny's book club ended at 9:30. She'd walk in around 10, full of stories about discussing some novel she'd never actually read. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, the lies stopped. At 10:17 p.m., I heard her key in the front door. She came in shaking rain from her coat, her cheeks flushed from more than just the cold weather. "Hey, honey," she called out, hanging up her coat. "Sorry I'm late." We got into this really intense discussion about the ending of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You know how Sarah gets when she's passionate about a book? I stayed seated at the kitchen table, the photos face down in front of me. "How is Sarah these days?" "She's good. Still dealing with her divorce drama, but she's hanging in there." Jenny kicked off her heels and padded into the kitchen in her stocking feet. "Did you eat? I can make you something." "I'm fine." I flipped over the first photo. "How's Rick doing?" Jenny froze halfway to the refrigerator. Her eyes locked onto the photo, her and Rick kissing in the motel parking lot. "Dave, I can explain." "Can you?" I flipped over another photo. This one showed them going into the motel room, his hand on her lower back in a gesture that spoke of familiarity and ownership. "Because I'm really curious to hear how you explain this." Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally a cold calculation that I'd never seen before. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This was someone else entirely. "How long have you been having me followed?" she asked. 2 weeks, though I probably should have done it months ago. I spread out more photos like I was dealing cards. "Every Friday for 4 months, Jenny." The Sleepy Inn Motel, room 237. You even have a routine: dinner at Gino's first, then 2 hours at the motel, then you drive to Sarah's house and sit in her driveway for 20 minutes so your story checks out when you get home. Jenny's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then she seemed to find her voice. "You have no right to spy on me." "I have every right." "I'm your husband." I stood up, and she actually took a step back. 8 years, Jenny. 8 years I've listened to you complain about this house, my job, my friends, my clothes, my hobbies. 8 years of feeling like I'm not good enough for you, and all this time you've been sneaking around with some marketing douche who probably tells you everything you want to hear. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I picked up one of the photos and held it inches from her face. You're having an affair with Rick Castellano. You've been lying to me for months. You've been making me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. So don't stand there and tell me it's not what I think. Tears started streaming down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, just that cold anger growing stronger. Dave, please. Let me explain. You don't understand what it's been like. What it's been like? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. What it's been like being married to me? Yeah, I can imagine. Having a husband who works with his hands, who doesn't make 6 figures, who actually likes this little house and this little town, must be torture. That's not fair. Fair? I gathered up the photos and slid them back into the envelope. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been telling me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around behind my back. Fair would have been asking for a divorce instead of making me feel like I was losing my mind. Jenny wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I never meant for this to happen, but it did happen. For 4 months, it happened. Every Friday night while I sat here like an idiot, trusting you. I walked to the kitchen window and stared out at the rain. So what now, Jenny? Do you want a divorce? Do you want to go play house with Rick in his fancy condo? I don't know, she whispered. I'm confused. I need time to think. I turned back to face her. Time to think? You've had 4 months to think. You chose Rick. You chose to lie to me. You chose to make me feel like the problem in our marriage. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. I'm not your problem anymore. Where are you going? Out. Don't wait up. I headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and Jenny? Next time you want to have an affair, maybe don't do it in the same motel room every week. Makes it real easy to get photos. I walked out into the rain, leaving her standing in our kitchen surrounded by the wreckage of our marriage. But as I got in my truck and drove away, I realized something that surprised me. I felt free. I spent the night at Cal's place, sleeping on his couch and drinking too much of his whiskey. Calvin Murphy had been my best friend since high school, a brick wall of a man who worked construction and had opinions about everything. When I told him about Jenny and the photos, his reaction was typically direct. Always knew she was trouble, he said, refilling my glass. Too good for the rest of us, you know? Always looking down her nose at Rita and the other wives at barbecues. She wasn't always like that, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that was true. Maybe I'd just been too blind to see it. You know, people don't change, Dave. They just get comfortable enough to show you who they really are. Cal raised his glass. To finding out the truth. I went home the next morning to find Jenny already gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter written in her precise handwriting. Gone to my sister's for a few days to think. We need to talk when I get back. Her sister lived in Boston, 3 hours away. Plenty of distance to spin this whole thing into being my fault somehow. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. The weekend crawled by. I worked on cars in my garage, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. But every time I heard a car door slam or saw movement in my peripheral vision, I thought it might be Jenny coming home. It wasn't until Monday that things got interesting. I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick when I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway of my shop. I slid out from under the car, expecting to see a customer, but instead found myself face to face with Rick Castellano. He looked exactly like his photos, mid-30s, perfectly groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. His BMW was parked behind him, still running. You must be Dave, he said, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. And you must be the guy screwing my wife. I wiped my hands on a shop rag, taking my time. What can I do for you, Rick? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Look, I know this is awkward. Awkward? I laughed. My wife cheating on me is awkward. You showing up at my place of business is something else entirely. I just want you to know that Jenny and I never meant for this to happen. It just developed naturally. Naturally? I nodded like I was considering this. You know what else develops naturally? Mold. Doesn't make it something you want in your house? Rick's jaw tightened. There's no need to be crude. Crude? You've been banging my wife in a cheap motel for 4 months, and you're worried about me being crude? I took a step closer to him. What exactly did you think was going to happen when you drove over here, Rick? That I'd shake your hand and wish you well? I thought we could handle this like adults. Adults don't sneak around behind people's backs. Adults don't lie and cheat, and then show up to lecture the person they betrayed about maturity. I could feel my temper starting to fray. You want to be with Jenny? Fine. But don't come to my shop and pretend this is some kind of friendly conversation. Rick straightened his tie, a nervous gesture that told me he wasn't as confident as he was trying to appear. Jenny's confused right now. She needs space to figure out what she wants. What she wants? The words came out louder than I intended. She wants you, Rick. She's been choosing you every Friday night for months. She's been lying to me to be with you. I'd say that's a pretty clear indication of what she wants. It's complicated. No, it's not. I threw the shop rag down on my workbench. It's actually pretty simple. You two want to be together. Go be together. But don't drag this out like some kind of soap opera where I'm supposed to fight for her or beg her to come back. Rick looked genuinely surprised. You're not going to fight for your marriage? Fight for what? Fight for a wife who's been cheating on me. Fight for a woman who looks at me like I'm an embarrassment? I shook my head. I've got more self-respect than that. Jenny loves you, Rick said, and I could tell he actually believed it. She needs something different right now. Yeah, she needs you, so take her and go. But Rick, I waited until he met my eyes. Don't ever come to my place again. You want to communicate with me? Do it through lawyers. Rick nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it happened this way. No, you're not, I said. You're sorry you got caught? There's a difference. After he left, I tried to get back to work, but my hands were shaking with adrenaline. The nerve of the guy, showing up here like he was doing me some kind of favor, like he was the reasonable one in this situation. I was still fuming when Cal showed up around lunchtime with sandwiches and beer. You look like hell, he said, setting the food down on my workbench. Rick paid me a visit this morning. Cal's eyebrows shot up. The boyfriend? What did he want? To handle this like adults, apparently? Wanted to let me know that he and Jenny never meant for this to happen. I took a long pull from my beer. Guy actually had the balls to tell me that Jenny loves me. What did you tell him? To stay away from my shop, and that he's welcome to her. Cal studied my face. You mean that? Yeah, I think I do. The admission surprised me. I mean, what's the alternative? Beg her to come back? Pretend this never happened? Spend the rest of my marriage wondering if she's really at book club or screwing around on me again? So you're getting divorced? Looks that way. I unwrapped my sandwich but didn't feel like eating. 8 years down the drain. Maybe not down the drain, Cal said carefully. Maybe you're just finding out who you really married before you wasted any more time. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. Patricia Hernandez had handled my business incorporation and came highly recommended. She listened to my story without judgment and gave me the kind of straightforward advice I needed. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, she explained. The affair doesn't really matter legally, but it might help in terms of asset division if she's been spending marital funds on her relationship. What do you mean? Dinners, hotels, gifts. If she's been using joint accounts or credit cards to fund the affair, that's considered waste of marital assets. We can potentially recover some of that. I thought about all those Friday night book clubs and girls' nights. How many of those had actually been dates with Rick that I'd unknowingly paid for? I want you to look into that, I said. I'll need bank statements, credit card records, anything you can get me. I can get you everything. We've always kept our finances together. I laughed bitterly. Guess that was a mistake. Actually, it might work in your favor now. I'll start drawing up papers. In the meantime, don't do anything dramatic. Don't move out, don't close accounts, don't make any big purchases. And Dave, yeah? Document everything. If she comes back and there are arguments, write them down. If she takes things from the house, photograph what's missing. If she brings him around, take pictures. You never know what might be useful later. I drove home that evening with a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking action instead of just reacting to whatever Jenny decided to do. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw her car parked in its usual spot. She was back from her sister's, which meant the real conversation was about to begin. I sat in my truck for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Then I grabbed the manila envelope Patricia had given me, divorce papers ready to be served, and headed inside. It was time to stop being the nice guy. Jenny was in the kitchen when I walked in, standing at the stove stirring something that smelled like her mother's beef stew. She'd changed into jeans and one of my old college t-shirts, the same outfit she used to wear when we were dating, and she'd cook dinner in her tiny apartment. Hey, she said without turning around, I thought I'd make your favorite. I set my keys on the counter and studied her. She looked tired, older somehow. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. How was Boston? I asked. Enlightening. She finally turned to face me. Michelle thinks I'm having a midlife crisis. Are you? Jenny considered this. Maybe. I don't know. Everything feels so complicated right now. I pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down. It doesn't have to be complicated, Jen. You're having an affair. You want to be with Rick. I'm not going to stand in your way. That's just it. I don't know if I want to be with Rick. I don't know what I want. She turned back to the stove. He's not what I thought he was. Meaning? Meaning when I told him I needed space to think, he got angry. Started talking about how he'd been patient enough, how he wasn't going to wait around forever for me to make up my mind. She stirred the stew more aggressively. He said if I really loved him, the choice would be easy. I felt a small, petty satisfaction at hearing that Rick wasn't handling the uncertainty well. So what did you tell him? I told him that maybe he was right. Maybe the choice should be easy. She turned off the burner and faced me again. Dave, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But these past few days, all I could think about was this house, our life together, the way you fix things instead of throwing them away, the way you never try to change me or pressure me to be someone I'm not. Unlike Rick, Rick has very definite ideas about what he wants in a partner. Where we should live, how I should dress, what kind of social circle we should have. She sat down across from me. With you, I always felt like I could just be myself. Then why the affair, Jenny? If I was so great, why Rick? She was quiet for a long moment. Because being yourself isn't always enough. Sometimes you want to be someone else, someone more exciting, more sophisticated, someone who deserves a man in an expensive suit, who takes her to fancy restaurants. And now I realize that being someone else is exhausting, and the person Rick fell for, that's not really me. That's some version of me that I created to impress him. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in months, vulnerability. The woman I'd married had always been confident to the point of arrogance, sure of what she wanted and how to get it. This version of Jenny seemed lost. So what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying I made a terrible mistake. I'm saying I want to end things with Rick and try to fix our marriage. She reached across the table toward my hand, but I pulled back. I know it won't be easy. I know you don't trust me right now. But Dave, we were happy once. We could be happy again. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process what she was saying. Part of me, the part that had loved this woman for 8 years, wanted to believe her, wanted to think that we could somehow go back to the way things were before. But the manila envelope in my jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Jenny, I said carefully, do you remember what you said to me the night I confronted you with the photos? I said a lot of things. I was upset, confused, Dash. You said I didn't understand what it had been like being married to me. Like I was some kind of burden you'd been carrying around for 8 years. Her face flushed. I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. Do they? Because it sounded like something you'd been thinking for a while. It sounded like the truth. It wasn't the truth. It was me trying to justify what I'd done by blaming you for it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our backyard. The leaves were almost all gone now, leaving the trees bare and stark against the gray November sky. Rick came to see me today, I said. What? The shock in her voice sounded genuine. He came to your shop? Yep. Wanted to handle this like adults. Told me you were confused and needed space to figure out what you wanted. I can't believe he did that. I told him I needed time to think, that I didn't want him contacting you or me until I sorted things out. Well, apparently Rick doesn't like being told what to do. I turned back to face her. You know what's funny? He actually seemed to think I'd fight for you, like this was some kind of competition and the best man would win. What did you tell him? I told him he could have you. Jenny flinched like I'd slapped her. You told him what? I told him that if you wanted to be with him, you should be with him. That I wasn't going to beg you to stay married to me, but I don't want to be with him. I want to be with you. Do you? Or do you just want to be with whoever's willing to put up with your crap? The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. You keep using that word. You had an affair for 4 months, lied to me every single day, made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong, and now you're worried about what's fair. I know I hurt you. You destroyed me, Jenny. You took everything I believed about our marriage, about you, about myself, and you burned it to the ground. And now you want to come back here and make beef stew and pretend like we can just start over? Tears were streaming down her face now. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve another chance. But Dave, I love you. I've always loved you. No, you don't. The certainty in my voice surprised both of us. You love the idea of me. You love having someone reliable to come home to, someone who won't challenge you or make demands. You love having a safety net. That's not true. No, isn't it? You spent 4 months with Rick, And the minute he started acting like he had expectations, you came running back to good old Dave. Dependable Dave who fixes cars and doesn't ask for much and will probably take you back because he's too nice to do anything else. I pulled the manila envelope out of my jacket and set it on the table between us. Well, guess what? Good old Dave is done. Jenny stared at the envelope like it was a snake. What is that? Divorce papers. I'm filing for divorce, Jenny. This marriage is over. Dave, please. Don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Work through what? Work through the fact that you cheated on me? Work through the fact that you only want me when your other option doesn't work out? I shook my head. I deserve better than being your consolation prize. You're not my consolation prize. You're my husband. Not for much longer. Jenny stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. This is insane. You're throwing away 8 years of marriage because I made one mistake. One mistake? I stared at her in disbelief. Jenny, you had an affair for 4 months. That's not one mistake. That's 100 mistakes. 100 choices to lie to me, to betray me, to put our marriage at risk for some guy you barely know. I know I screwed up, but marriages survive affairs all the time. People work through this kind of thing. Some people do, but those people usually have something worth saving. I picked up the envelope and held it out to her. What do we have worth saving, Jenny? A marriage where you're ashamed of me, where you lie to me, where you cheat on me the minute someone more exciting comes along? She didn't take the envelope. I'm not ashamed of you. Yes, you are. You've been ashamed of me for years. Ashamed of this house, ashamed of my job, ashamed of my friends. The only reason you stayed was because it was comfortable and safe. But the minute Rick offered you something that felt more exciting, you jumped at it. That's not how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. And you know what the really sad part is? I spent so much time trying to be good enough for you that I forgot I deserved someone who actually wanted to be with me. Jenny was sobbing now, ugly crying that made her mascara run down her cheeks. Dave, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll do anything. There's nothing to do, Jen. It's over. I walked toward the door, then stopped. You can stay in the house until we figure out the details. I'll be at Cal's. But Jenny, don't try to contact me unless it's through lawyers. And if Rick shows up here, I'm calling the police. Where are you going? To start over. Something I should have done a long time ago. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear Jenny crying, but for the first time in months, her tears weren't my problem to fix. 3 weeks later, I was rebuilding the engine on a 1967 Mustang when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and to the point. Your wife is at Flanagan's with my husband. Thought you should know. Sarah Chen. Sarah Chen was Rick's ex-wife. I'd never met her, but Patricia had mentioned her during one of our meetings. Apparently, Rick's divorce had been messy, with accusations of infidelity on both sides. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and texted back, "Thanks for the heads up. How did you get my number?" The response came quickly. Phone book. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the Starbucks on Main Street in an hour? I almost said no. The last thing I needed was to get dragged into Rick's previous relationship drama. But something about the urgency in her messages made me curious. Sarah Chen turned out to be a petite woman in her early 30s with short black hair and intelligent dark eyes. She was sitting in a corner booth when I arrived, nursing a large coffee and looking like she hadn't slept much recently. Dave Walsh, she asked as I approached. That's me. I sat down across from her. So what's this about? Well, it's about Rick and your wife making my life hell. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. He's been harassing me for weeks, trying to get me to agree to reduce his alimony payments. Says he's planning to get married again and needs to restructure his financial obligations. I read through the messages. Rick's tone was demanding, almost threatening. Have you talked to your lawyer? Of course. But there's not much I can do about harassment unless it crosses certain lines, and Rick's smart enough to stay just on the legal side of things. She took a sip of her coffee. The thing is, I don't think your wife knows about his financial situation. What do you mean? I mean, Rick is broke, Dave. The alimony payments, the condo, the car, the fancy dinners. He's living way beyond his means. He's been trying to get me to agree to a reduction in support for months, and when I refused, he started getting nasty. She showed me more messages, these ones more recent. Rick was demanding that she agree to a 50% reduction in alimony, claiming that his income had decreased. But Sarah had done her homework. I had my lawyer look into his finances. Rick got a promotion 3 months ago. His income went up, not down. He's lying about his financial situation to try to reduce what he owes me. So why are you telling me this? Because I think your wife is his exit strategy. He's planning to marry her and use her income to maintain his lifestyle while reducing what he pays me. Sarah leaned forward. Dave, I know this isn't your problem anymore, but Jenny seems like a nice woman who's about to get taken for a ride. I thought about this. Jenny had always been smart about money, careful with investments and savings. If Rick was planning to use her financially, she deserved to know what she was getting into. There's something else, Sarah continued. Rick has a pattern. This isn't his first affair. He cheated on me multiple times during our marriage, always with women who had something he wanted. Money, connections, status. I ignored the warning signs because I loved him, but looking back, I can see exactly how he operates. And you think he's operating on Jenny? I know he is. The expensive dinners, the gifts, the promises about their future together, it's all part of his playbook. He makes women feel special and sophisticated, like they're part of some exclusive club. But once he gets what he wants, the charm disappears pretty quickly. I remembered what Jenny had said about Rick getting angry when she asked for space, about his expectations for how she should dress and behave. Maybe Sarah was right. So what do you want me to do about it? I asked. I want to expose him. I want Jenny to see who she's really dealing with before she makes any permanent decisions. Sarah pulled out a manila folder. I've got documentation of his real financial situation, copies of his harassment messages to me, even some photos from his previous affairs that I found on his old laptop. Why would you help Jenny? She's the reason your ex-husband is trying to reduce your alimony. Sarah smiled grimly. Because Rick destroyed my marriage and tried to destroy me in the divorce. I've spent 2 years rebuilding my life, and now he's trying to screw me over again. I want him to face some consequences for once. I looked through the folder she'd given me. Bank statements showing Rick's real income, credit card bills revealing massive debt, photos of him with other women during his marriage to Sarah. It was a comprehensive picture of a man who was not at all what he appeared to be. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Flanagan's is having their annual charity auction this Saturday night. It's a big social event. All the Morrison and Associates people will be there, including Rick and Jenny. I think they should all see who Rick really is. I closed the folder and handed it back to her. Sarah, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not interested in playing games. Jenny made her choice. If she wants to learn about Rick the hard way, that's her business. Even if it means she's going to get hurt? Even then, I'm not her protector anymore. Sarah studied my face for a moment. You know, Rick told me you were a pushover. Said Jenny complained about being married to someone with no ambition, no fight in him. The words stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Rick says a lot of things. He also said you'd probably take her back when things didn't work out between them. That you were the type of guy who'd always be there as a backup plan. Now she had my attention. He said that? Last week, when he was pressuring me about the alimony. He said not to worry about him affording payments because he had options. That worst-case scenario, Jenny would go back to her husband and he could find someone else with better financial prospects. I felt that familiar, cold anger starting to build in my chest. He's using her. Of course he's using her. Just like he used me, just like he's used every woman he's ever been with. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Look, Dave, I get that you're done with your marriage. But don't you think Jenny deserves to know what she's really getting into? I thought about Jenny sitting in our kitchen 3 weeks ago, crying and begging for another chance. She'd been genuinely confused about what she wanted, torn between the life she'd built with me and the excitement Rick represented. What if Sarah was right? What if Rick was just manipulating her the same way he'd manipulated his ex-wife? What exactly are you planning for Saturday night? I asked. Sarah smiled. Nothing illegal. Nothing that could get either of us in trouble. Just a little public education about Rick's true character. And you need me because you know Jenny. You know how she thinks, how she'll react, and because Rick thinks you're a pushover who won't fight back. It's time to show him how wrong he is. I sat there for a long moment, weighing my options. The smart thing would be to walk away, let Jenny figure out her own mistakes, but the thought of Rick using her, of him laughing about how easy it would be to manipulate both of us, made my blood boil. All right, I said finally. What do you need me to do? Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. Leave that to me. Just be at Flanagan's on Saturday night and be ready to watch Rick's world fall apart. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. But Rick had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He thought I was just some blue-collar guy who'd roll over and let him take whatever he wanted. Saturday night, he was going to learn how wrong he was. Flanagan's Irish pub had been transformed for their annual charity auction. White tablecloths covered the usual scarred wooden tables, and someone had hung string lights around the room to create what the event organizers probably thought was ambiance. The place was packed with Morrison and Associates employees and their spouses, all dressed up and pretending to care about raising money for the local animal shelter. I'd borrowed a suit from Cal and positioned myself at the bar where I could see most of the room. Jenny and Rick were at a table near the front, and I had to admit they looked good together. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, and Rick was in his element, working the room like he owned it. Sarah Chen entered at exactly 8 o'clock, wearing a red dress that turned heads and carrying a large manila envelope. She caught my eye across the room and nodded slightly. Game time. The auction had been going on for about 30 minutes when Sarah made her move. She walked up to the microphone during a lull between items and tapped it to get everyone's attention. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I know this is unusual, but I have something I'd like to auction off for charity." The auctioneer, a cheerful man named Bob who owned the local furniture store, looked confused. "I'm sorry, miss, but all the auction items have to be registered in advance." "Oh, this is registered," Sarah said with a sweet smile. "I registered it with the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. It's a comprehensive financial portfolio belonging to Rick Castellano, including documentation of tax fraud, alimony evasion, and fraudulent loan applications." The room went dead silent. Rick shot to his feet, his face white. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Sarah?" "And I'm doing what I should have done 2 years ago, telling the truth about who you really are." Sarah opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. "Did you know, for instance, that Rick here has been claiming a 30% reduction in income to avoid paying his court-ordered alimony, while simultaneously getting a promotion and a 25% raise at Morrison & Associates?" Jenny was staring at Rick with a look of dawning horror. Around the room, people were starting to murmur and pull out their phones. "Sarah, stop this right now," Rick said, starting toward the microphone. "You're making a scene." "Oh, I'm just getting started." Sarah held up a photograph. "This is Rick with his secretary, taken 6 months before our divorce was finalized. And this one is Rick with a client's wife, taken 3 months after that. And this one..." She continued pulling out photos, each one showing Rick with a different woman. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and I saw several Morrison & Associates employees exchanging shocked looks. Jenny stood up slowly, her face pale. "Rick, what is she talking about?" "She's lying, baby. She's just trying to cause trouble because she's bitter about the divorce." Rick tried to grab the microphone from Sarah, but she stepped back. "Am I lying about this?" Sarah held up a bank statement. "This shows Rick's real income, the income he's been hiding from the court to avoid paying what he owes me. Or how about this?" She held up another document. "A loan application where Rick claimed to be single and earning $40,000 less than his real salary." "That's private financial information," Rick shouted. "You can't just..." "Actually, I can. It became public record when you committed fraud." Sarah turned to address the room. "You see, Rick has a very simple business model. He finds women with money or connections, charms them into supporting his lifestyle, and then moves on when someone better comes along. He did it to me, he did it to at least 3 other women I know about, and he's doing it to Jenny Walsh right now." All eyes turned to Jenny, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I don't understand." "Of course you don't, honey. Rick is very good at what he does." Sarah's voice was almost gentle now. "Tell me, has he started talking about your future together? Maybe mentioned how nice it would be to combine your finances. Suggested that you could help him out with some temporary cash flow issues?" Jenny's face went even paler. "How did you..." "Because it's his pattern. He's probably told you that his ex-wife is bleeding him dry with alimony payments, right? That he'd be financially stable if it wasn't for my unreasonable demands?" "Sarah, that's enough." Rick lunged for the microphone again, but this time Cal stepped out of the crowd to block his path. My friend had been waiting near the back of the room, and at 6'4" and 250 pounds, he made an effective barrier. "I don't think so, buddy," Cal said calmly. "The lady's not done talking." Sarah smiled at Cal, then turned back to the crowd. "The truth is, Rick owes me exactly what the court ordered him to pay. No more, no less. But he's been living beyond his means for years, and now he needs someone else to subsidize his lifestyle. Someone like Jenny, who has a good job and savings and doesn't know about his massive credit card debt." She held up more documents. $43,000 in credit card debt, spread across 7 different cards, a car loan that's underwater by $15,000, and a condo mortgage that he's been late on for the past 4 months. Jenny sank back into her chair like someone had cut her strings. Around the room, people were openly staring now, some taking pictures and videos with their phones. "This is harassment," Rick shouted, trying to push past Cal. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," Sarah said cheerfully. "I'm sure they'd love to see this documentation of your fraudulent loan applications. And I know the IRS would be very interested in your creative income reporting." That's when Rick snapped. He shoved Cal hard enough to knock him back a step, then rushed the stage. But Sarah had anticipated this. She tossed the microphone to me and stepped aside as Rick stumbled past her. I caught the microphone and found myself standing in front of a room full of people who knew my wife had been cheating on me. For a moment, I almost handed it back. But then I saw Rick's face, saw the entitled rage there, and remembered what Sarah had told me about him calling me a pushover. "You know," I said into the microphone, "Rick came to see me a few weeks ago. Wanted to handle things like adults," he said. Told me that Jenny was confused and needed space to figure out what she wanted. The room was dead silent now. Jenny was staring at me with wide eyes, and Rick had stopped struggling against Cal's grip. What he didn't tell me was that he'd already decided what she should want. He had her whole future mapped out, how she'd help him pay his debts, support his lifestyle, maybe even help him reduce what he owes his ex-wife. I looked directly at Rick. "You thought you were so smart, didn't you? Thought you could manipulate both of us?" "Dave, don't do this," Jenny said quietly, but I was past caring about her embarrassment. "You called me a pushover, Rick. Said I was the kind of guy who'd always be there as a backup plan. Said Jenny complained about being married to someone with no ambition." I smiled, and it felt sharp as broken glass. "Well, here's some ambition for you." I pulled out my own manila envelope, the one Patricia had prepared for me. "These are divorce papers, Jenny. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm citing adultery and waste of marital assets. Every dinner Rick bought you, every hotel room, every gift, I'm going after all of it." Jenny's face crumpled. "Dave, please..." "And Rick?" "Sarah's not the only one who's been documenting your behavior. I've got photos, bank records, witness statements. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you do to people." Rick finally broke free from Cal and rushed toward me, but he was too angry to think straight. I'd been working with my hands my whole life, and I'd learned how to handle myself in Cal's boxing gym. When Rick swung at me, I ducked easily and landed a solid punch to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees. The room erupted in chaos. People were shouting, phones were recording, and someone was calling for security. But I felt calm for the first time in months. I handed the microphone back to the stunned auctioneer and walked over to where Jenny was sitting. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks, looking small and broken. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way," I said quietly. "But you needed to know who you were really dealing with. Dave, I never knew about any of this. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. But it doesn't change anything between us." I set the divorce papers on the table in front of her. "We're done, Jenny. For real this time." I started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. "For what it's worth, you deserve better than Rick. You deserve better than me, too, probably. But you'll never find it if you keep looking for someone to fix your problems instead of fixing them yourself." I walked out of Flanagan's into the cool November night, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and Rick's reputation. Sarah was waiting by my truck, smoking a cigarette and looking satisfied. "That went better than I expected," she said. "Think it'll stick? Think people will remember?" "Oh, they'll remember." Half the room was recording. "By tomorrow morning, everyone in town will know what Rick Castellano really is." She took a long drag from her cigarette. "Question is, what are you going to do now?" I looked back at the pub, where I could see people still milling around, probably dissecting everything that had just happened. In a few minutes, Jenny would have to walk out of there and face all those stares and whispers. Rick would have to explain to his boss and coworkers how he'd ended up on the floor of a charity auction. But that wasn't my problem anymore. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I'm going to finish rebuilding that Mustang engine. And tomorrow, I'm going to start figuring out what the rest of my life looks like." Sarah smiled. "Sounds like a plan. Thanks for helping me take Rick down a few pegs. Thank you for showing me I didn't have to be a pushover." I drove home through the quiet streets of our small town, past the houses where my neighbors were probably already hearing about what had happened at Flanagan's. By morning, everyone would know the whole story. But for the first time in months, I didn't care what people thought. I'd stopped being the nice guy who let people walk all over him. I'd stopped trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. And it felt like freedom. 6 months later, I sold the house and moved to a bigger town an hour north, where I opened a custom auto shop specializing in classic car restoration. Jenny got a job in Boston and moved there after our divorce was finalized. Rick was fired from Morrison and Associates, and last I heard, he was selling insurance and living in a studio apartment. Sarah sent me a Christmas card that year with a photo of her new house. Bought with the back alimony Rick was finally forced to pay. She'd written on the back, "Thanks for helping me prove that nice guys don't have to finish last." She was right. Sometimes the nice guy just needs to stop being so nice.